He's a bum! He's been a bum! He's been a bum since '86!
Bleach Thousand Year Blood War episode number 17 is the latest in a very consistent string of Bleach episodes since the start of core number 2. Now I know there's a lot of intriguing things that you guys want me to get to, but rest assured we'll get there, but we're going to do this the same way we always do. I've broken up the entire episode into bits and pieces. We're going to break it down bit by bit until we get to the good stuff wherever it is that you want. There are chapters underneath so you can just pick whichever place you want to go specifically. It's all for your convenience. Without wasting any further time, remember to like, comment, subscribe. Let's get started. Bleach Thousand Year Blood War episode number 17, I have cut into 10 individual parts. When we're talking about the pacing of the entire episode, 10 parts overall, it's one of the better paced episodes that you'll see from Bleach Thousand Year Blood War Core 2. So let's start with part number 1. Bambietta awakens her Vorstandish, as does the other Sternritter, and specifically the Femritters who are also around the area. Now, this is where we left off the last episode. We saw Bambietta get very angry that she was fighting Shinji, and Shinji's Shikai called Sakanade was giving her more trouble than she was able to handle. And so she responded, and like after losing the Shinigami Bankai, they all enter their Vorstandish form, which she does. It's red. The animation for this particular scene is really good. You'll see the colors are good, but specifically there are a ton of great particle effects that for one, I've really enjoyed what Bleach does with the particle effects, and almost like within the Ryotsu, you can kind of see, it's kind of weird for me to describe, but within the Ryotsu, there's almost some sort of synergy form, wave-like flow of the Quincy Vorstandish Ryotsu in of itself. Very good. In addition to that, all the other Femritters, including Candace Catnip, Meninas McAllen, Giselle, and so on, they also awakened their Vorstandish because it sort of resonated with what Bambietta was doing. So they all had their wings also show up, not because they wanted to, but it sort of just resonated with what she was doing. In part number 2, we have Shinji versus Bambietta, and yeah, Shinji loses again. I would like to re-welcome Shinji back into the Fraud Academy. He left for literally one episode and he's already back in there. It's extremely embarrassing. Shinji thought he still had his Sakanade effect on Bambietta, but she just proceeded to just nuke the entire area along with him, following up with another bomb that takes him down for the count. Shinji is out. He's out. Momo tries to come in to help him when Sergeant Kumamura comes in to protect Shinji and get Momo out of the way, protecting them both from Bambietta's bombs, and then asking Momo to relocate so he can fight Bambietta alone. So Shinji Hirako, forever a fraud. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules, but Shinji Hirako, you are a fraud. You are being inducted back into Fraud Academy. Now, part 3 of this episode has to do with Bambietta versus Kumamura, the fight itself, and we get a lot of characterization about Bambietta's abilities and also this new version of Kumamura that we now have. Now, to first touch on Bambietta's Vorstandish gives her the ability to shoot these bombs, but it's not as simple as just, I'm just shooting bombs. The cool thing about Bambietta's ability is that her Ryotsu projectiles aren't bombs in of itself, but whatever her Ryotsu projectiles touch become bombs. And so the way you want to think about it here is that if she's fighting an opponent and she fires one of her Reishi projectiles, the Reishi projectiles in of itself isn't the bomb. Whatever it comes into contact with becomes the bomb, which makes defending it very complicated. Because if you can imagine, if you're fighting her and you block with your arm, if it makes contact with your arm, now your arm is the bomb and then your arm explodes. And that's what makes Bambietta so fierce of a fighter, because it's really difficult to defend against it, because if it makes contact with you or it makes contact with anything around you, those things become bombs. And at the moment, I don't believe that there is any limit to what it is. It's like, for example, are there things that she can turn into bombs? At the moment, we don't know. We don't know that right now. From what I can perceive about her abilities, anything it touches becomes a bomb. Human body parts, armor, stones, whatever, it just becomes bombs. I'm interested to know if it would work on something like Ryotsu. For example, if her energy clashes with like a Kido, would the Kido become a bomb? I'm not sure. Is neither here or there. one of the more intriguing aspects of the episode happens when we find out that Sajin has a human form. So he's attacked by Bambietta, there's an explosion, and the armor he's wearing breaks off to reveal that Sajin is now a human. And we get a little bit of information on what that entails. So from my understanding of it, and if you think that I'm wrong or interpreting this wrongly, please be sure to just tell me in the comment section below. Let's talk about it. But based on what I can understand and perceive from what we saw, the Jinka technique, which is what they call it, the Jinka technique is a technique that allows members of the Beast Clan to return to the forms they were prior to being banished into the Beast Realm. So I'm going to try and paint a picture of what I think the sequence is, okay? So there was a werewolf clan sometime in the past, and the werewolf clan were banished to the Beast Realm as a result of their sins. But they left the Beast Realm and came to the Soul Society. Now, by breaking the chains of sin that bind them, they can return back to their, quote, humanistic forms, and in doing so gain a boost in power. And the way in which they're able to initiate the breaking of these proverbial chains is by ripping out their heart and offering it up. And then what the second part is, we don't know, because you'll see that Sajin speaks with his grandfather, the great dog demon Inuyasha's dad. He goes and he talks to him, and that's exactly what I'm going to call him, Sumi. So he goes and he talks with the great dog demon Inuyasha's father, which is a lot of things to say, but anyway, so he goes and he talks to him, and his grandfather tells him to rip out his heart in exchange for him bestowing the power of the Jinka technique to him, which answers part of the question, not all of it. Let me explain. So the conversation he has with his grandfather answers that one part of the initiation ritual for the Jinka technique is offering up your heart, but we don't know exactly what else is there to do so. For example, does it mean by literally ripping out your heart and giving it to him, do you then transform on the spot, or is there like another aspect or another thing that you'd have to do after offering up your heart? Because one of the things you can sort of conclude about this interaction here is not only is it necessary for Sajin to offer up his heart, but it is also a symbol of intent to prove to his grandfather that his conviction is real and that he intends to do what he must. And so it's sort of satisfying two different things. On one end, you actually need to offer up your heart to attain this technique, but on the other, you need to prove to me that you mean what you say when you ask me for this ability. And if you give me your heart as this showcase of conviction, I will then bestow onto you the powers of the Jinka technique. And that's sort of my understanding of the whole thing. It's not, Kuba doesn't really tell us the full thing, but I guess for what matters is the heart. You have to offer up your heart, which is what Sajin did. So now that he's on the battlefield, he is in his human form, the peak form that a member of the Beast Clan can assume. He summons his Bankai, Kokujo Tengen Myo, but then uses a new ability that you can attain once you have used this Jinka technique, which is Kokujo Tengen Myo Dangai Joe. Now let's talk about Dangai Joe here for a second. The way you want to think about it here is Kokujo Tengen Myo summons this armor, like this huge creature wearing armor. Sajin explains that the essence of his Bankai is in the armor, the life is in the armor, and by shedding the armor, which is what Dangai Joe is, all that's left is sort of unbridled, just Ryotsu devoid of life, which makes it impervious to death. The same way he now is immortal because he's given up his life by giving up his heart. He's now an immortal being. He's a vessel for his vengeance. And so he goes and he does battle with Bambietta. And by the way, the entire sequence of Sajin's Bankai is CGI, but don't let the Doom posters tell you differently. The CGI was fine. I had zero issues with it. You could sort of, if you really want to nitpick, I can understand nitpicking certain scenarios, sure. But for the level of CGI that we get in modern anime, this is by no means anything less than spectacular, I would say. For the level that we get, I would say that. But in any case, the battle between Shinji and Bambietta in of itself, it's very well done in my opinion, because it's sort of a unique battle you can't see, because Bambietta is flying all around, and the way that she fires her projectiles, her exploding projectiles, is through her wings. She doesn't actually use like her hands or her fist or whatever. The wings sort of shoot these projectiles. So there's a lot of the effects animation has to carry a big part of this interaction, because it's all explosions, which are all effects, smoke, dust, particles, all that stuff. It's all great. You can see her, and the direction specifically of this episode, the direction storyboarding are some of the best you will see for Core 2 of Bleach so far. Her spinning around, things like that. So as they're interacting, as they're fighting, Bambietta can't understand why Sajin would do this, and we sort of get a feel for the level of conviction that Sajin has, because he is here on a path of vengeance because the Queen Seas killed Genryusa Yamamoto, who took him in, not shunned him because of the way he looked, and he's here to exact revenge. And as he said, I have already left my life behind. He deals Bambietta a heavy blow, causing a massive explosion, and kudos to the anime for actually detailing what happened, because on one level you can think about it as like he's holding a sword and he slashes, but his slash causes an explosion. Doesn't quite make sense unless you're also firing some sort of Ryatsu ability or whatever. So it was very cool of the anime to sort of slow things down and show you what's happening. And what's actually happening here is that Sajin swiped at Bambietta. We see it in slow motion in that her bombs were she was trying to defend herself, and so her bombs were shooting outward towards his big blade of his Bankai. But the blade of the Bankai was it was taking that bomb and almost pushing it towards her body faster than her Ryatsu could make a bomb out of what it was touching, which then caused the explosion, which I think is quite cool to think about, in that the rule here is of Bambietta's Bambietta's full foundation ability, the explode, or her shrift, I should say, is that whatever she touches turns to bombs. However, the speed at which it's able to turn something into a bomb is not absolute, and it's not the fastest there is. And so since for what Sajin was doing, for whatever reason, again, you can not, if you don't like it, I understand, but for whatever reason, the speed at which Sajin hit her was faster than she could make a bomb out of what was touching her, and then that caused the explosion, and she essentially she got hit by her own explosion, and she falls down, and she's down for the count. Sajin Komamura has just defeated Bambietta Bastard Brine. And I suppose I should also mention that a vital aspect of his Bankai is that when Bambietta makes contact with the Bankai and tries to explode it, it does explode, it just recovers. He just regenerates. And his body, because the link between his Bankai and he himself still exists. If you hit the Bankai, it will hit him as well. But because they're just a shell in a vessel with no, quote, life, no damage, no real damage, seemingly taken. And so that's also a very important aspect for us to understand. So moving on to part 4, which is called Price and Penalty. For me, I've dubbed it Price and Penalty. We sort of see the fallout of everything that's happened. And this scene right here, it's not only is it very heavy in terms of what it represents, it's also very heavy just in terms of the amount of things that are going on. And so let's just start from the top and slowly build our way down to form a full picture of what happened here. So first things first, Bambietta is down for the count, so she's out. Sajin starts to feel some sort of negative effect, as if he sort of falls down to one knee as though he was losing power, he was losing life, he was losing energy. And so he's feeling very tired at this moment in time. And on one end, it would seem that the Jinka technique has a time limit, or at least a power limit. It has a limit of some kind, whether it's a limit of how much damage you can take before it starts affecting you, whether it's a limit of how long you can just be in it while, like, after starting the technique, we don't know. But the way Sajin speaks about it, it makes it seem like he didn't know that there was a time limit. That's how it seemed, because he's surprised at what is happening, like, what's going on, I just need a little bit more time. It would seem that he did have a time limit, because if he knew about the time limit, it sort of brings up a question that I suppose we can all ponder over, in that the reason why I don't think Sajin knew there was a time limit is that if there actually was a time limit, he would have headed straight for Yuha Baha and not turned back at all, because he knows he can only do this for a certain amount of time. I think that he didn't know that there was a time limit, which is why he decided to deviate from heading straight to Yuha to come save Shinji and Momo and do battle with Bambietta. If he had known that there was a time limit, I do believe he would have headed straight for Yuha Baha. So that's on one level. So right there, the great dog demon Inuyasha's dad didn't tell Sajin the entire story. He did not tell him about the time limit. That's my assumption. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I assume. So thing number 1. There you go. Number 2, Sajin got played. Sajin got conned. Sajin got scammed. Because a second part here is Inuyasha's dad essentially eats the heart of Sajin Komamura. You can't tell me that Sajin knew that was going to happen. I don't believe Sajin knew that was going to happen. That probably caught him off guard. And from the perspective of this great dog demon grandfather of Sajin's, he's playing like a position where on one end, he believes that the true essence of someone who's part of the beast realm is vengeance. And he waits until Sajin's heart is filled with vengeance. And he's talking to Sajin, telling him to let the vengeance overcome him, to despise his reality, to hate everything that's around him. Let that negative energy flow through you. Like, let it overflow. The dark resentment is what he called it. And as if to say, after his heart was ripe with that hatred and lust for vengeance, he eats it and says, your dark resentment will sustain me. And so that's the second point right there. And that Sajin doesn't seem like Sajin knew that his grandfather would do that. And his grandfather seemingly waited until Sajin's heart was filled with that dark resentment and then ate it in order to sustain himself. That's point number 2. And then point number 3 is the irony of this entire situation, as Sajin soon learns, in that Sajin spent majority of Bleach Part 1, talking Noriko Abe's Bleach, trying to get Kaname to leave his path of vengeance, because Kaname wanted to stand with Aizen to destroy the known structure of the world because of what they did to his friend. And you will see that in Can't Fear Your Own World, it was very terrible. The society in of itself did not allow justice to prevail. And as a result of that, Kaname decided to form his own justice, the true justice of the world, and he decided to work with Aizen to make that new reality come true. And we spent a lot of time watching Kumamoto try to convince Kaname that vengeance is not the way. And the irony of this entire situation here is that Sajin Kumamoto did not take his own advice, which is, it's so ironic, but it's so human. It's like the most human thing that Sajin has done so far, in that sometimes it's easy to point things out to someone. When it's happening to you, you have no ideas. There's a certain level of self-reflection and self-awareness that you need to be able to know when you're doing a thing that you told other people not to do. The price he paid for his desire for vengeance and selling his soul for revenge is becoming an animal who can't really speak. He can't do anything. And sort of putting your mind into the shoes of Kubo, like put yourself into Kubo's shoes here. Kubo just started this like long narrative of Kumamoto and Kaname's friendship. Kaname sort of dejecting and becoming evil. Kumamoto trying to fight against Kaname to get him to see the truth, all the way up to this point. And the resolution here is that Kumamoto also made the exact same mistake. There is no redemption, there is no freedom, there is no joy, there is no happy ending, there is no good thing at the end. He has his heart eaten by his grandfather filled with vengeance. He loses his ability to speak, he loses his ability to use his Zanpakuto, he loses his ability to be a captain and a member of the court guard squads. He loses everything, and Kubo literally just leaves it there like that. Which is so weird from a narrative perspective. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's such a weird choice, because if you look at that narrative thread from the beginning to the end, it ends here. The end of this story of Kaname and Kumamoto is Kaname lived a life of vengeance and died before he could really truly change. Kumamoto did not live a life of vengeance, but then he later on felt what it was like to be vengeful and made the same mistake and also died without a resolution. Well, he's not literally dead, but proverbially, for all intents and purposes, the Kumamoto we know is gone. And Kubo is like, yep, quality writing right there. And it is quality, but it's so weird that he chooses not to have a quote happy ending, because Kubo is sending a very heartfelt, clear message. Vengeance will eat you alive. It is a dual-edged sword, or whatever. What's the expression? Like a two-tongued snake, or like a dual-edged sword, whatever. Like, it poisons you just as it poisons the world. And sometimes when you make a bad decision, there is no do-over. Sometimes when you're the one who makes that bad call, you don't get a second chance. Sometimes the one chance is all you have. And if you miss it, you're done. And that's what Kumamoto is. Price and penalty. He paid the price, and he had to fit the penalty. It's tragic. Finally, the last thing I want to say about this whole section here is that if you think about this whole Beast Realm concept over here, it does seem to be that members of the Beast clan can assume 3 different forms. And so, just to give you a perspective here, you can either be a beast human, which is kind of like what Sajin was, because Sajin was a beast, but he stood on 2 feet, he could talk, he had like hands to hold a sword and whatever. So he was a beast, but he was like a beast human. That's one thing. And then you can be just a beast, just like Sajin ended up becoming, where you're a beast, you're much smaller, you don't have the ability to hold a sword, you're a straight up dog, you're a straight up wolf, you're straight up whatever you want to call it. Like you are a literal animal right now, which is different from what he was before. And then there was a third form where you were a beast, but you can speak, because Sajin's grandfather, he could talk. He couldn't talk conventionally. You sort of like, I don't know, opened his mouth or whatever, but he could speak. And so these are sort of the 3 different forms of members of the Beast Clan. You can either be a beast human, you can be a beast who doesn't speak, and then you can be a beast who does speak. Those are the 3. So overall, this entire section, I would say it's great stuff. The direction on this part, there are specific shots here where Komamura is walking forward, and you can see the image of his Bankai in the background walking with him. And the camera's like in front of them, and you can just see them in the distance. Great shot. There's also another great shot where after he lands back down after defeating Bambietta, and he stands up, there's a shot of Yuha sitting on his throne looking out into the city, and in the distance you can see Komamura's Bankai standing, towering over all the other buildings, and it's so bone-chilling to see that. And then the entire sequence of him transforming back into a beast is animated by Hiroyuki Yamashita, the ace, the legend himself, Hiroyuki Yamashita. And it's one of the best pieces of animation you'll see of Core 2 so far. Elite stuff. The weight, the detail, well, first of all, the detail on his face, but also the weight of his breathing, the teeth, his sort of his fingers turning into paws, and sort of the pain that he's feeling as he's morphing, transforming, the hair sprouting out. Everything about it was just divine. And then in the closing sequences of this particular scene, Tetsuzaemon comes in to see Sajin and lifts him up. And as he's walking, his footprint is what shows the bleach number 17. And then in the distance, right above Yuha's castle, Heart of Wolf. Tremendous stuff. So moving on, part 6, Uryu Ishida seemingly goes to retrieve the fallen Sternator. He goes and he sees Shang-Du, who has been defeated but is sort of recuperating, and I feel like he can't fight anymore, or at least it seems that way. Uryu goes through the Quincy Shadow teleportation ability and seemingly grabs him. Now, the next time we see Shang-Du, he's on the ground, unconscious or something. He's not moving. Whether it because he's just that tired or you put the beat down on him, I don't know. But then he goes and grabs BG9 as well, and they move. So that's part 6. In part 7, we see Jugrim and Shinsui. Now, this scene, the most unnecessary scene in the entire episode. Quite frankly, this entire scene has been so boring, I don't care about it. It's just Shinsui and Jugrim just standing there looking cool, looking badass, and doing nothing. They're not doing anything of worth. Like, fine, you have what's her name? You have Nanao, who's there showing her Kido proficiency. I don't care. And you have Jugrim, who doesn't want to do anything, but when he finally tries to do something, Yuha calls him and he has to leave. The whole thing. Look, we're moving on. I got nothing to say about that. Moving on to part 8. Part 8 is Mask Demasculate versus the Lieutenants. Now, Mask is my boy. I like Mask. I think he's cool. Mask basically puts the beat down on the Lieutenants, and we sort of see the first effect of what James does. And can I just say, James is hilarious. I'm gonna try to find ways to incorporate James's, you know, the weird high pitched sounds that he makes. Like, I'll play it right here if I can. It's like, the dude is hilarious. Bro is hilarious. I love him. All right, he's funny. He's really, really funny. So Mask gets up after, you know, James chews him on it. He puts the beat down on Shuei Hisagi, on Ikaku Madarame and Yumichika Hayashikawa, I think is the last name. He puts the beat down on him, but as he's fighting them, 2 newcomers emerge from the sky. It's Ruki and Renji. We don't see that it's them, but it's nice to know that they're on their way and they've touched ground. Eventually we'll see what we can about that, but they're here. They have touched ground back onto the Seirei type. In part 9, Kensei Muguruma and Rose, what's Rose's last name? I don't care. Rose appear. Now, this is interesting because I guess when Mask puts the beat down on the Lieutenants, and he's about to stomp on Hisagi when Kensei comes in and he puts his foot underneath, kind of like if you guys No, I think Bleach did it first, but maybe because maybe more people have seen it. What Luffy and Doflamingo did when Doflamingo wanted to stomp on Law and Luffy stopped his foot with his own foot. That's what Kensei does here with Mask. Apparently Bleach did it first, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, so Kensei and Rose are now matched up with Mask the Masculine. And this will be a very interesting fight moving forward. But Kensei, Fraud Academy, Rose, Fraud Academy. We'll see if they can do anything to get out of it, but I'm not holding my breath. They're both frauds. Both frauds. If they don't holify, they're massive, massive frauds. Even more frauds than they already are. We can put that to the side. That is part 9. Finally, we go to part 10. Ichigo's final scene. Now, in this scene, Ichigo is really close to the finish line, but he's overcome with a tremendous amount of pressure. And as veins pop and engorge on his arm, he grips his wooden stick, and Ichibei then speaks very heavy words that carry a ton of value. He says to Ichigo that the weight that you feel is what you are trying to protect. Everything that you see are everlasting memories and revelations. In other words, the power of the king. Ichigo is met with a flurry of intense visions as energy begins to swirl around him. Energy of different colors representing the different types of beings in Bleach surround him, or seemingly being like absorbed into Ichigo's body. Ichibei then continues to say, "Are you a vessel capable of withstanding the power that fills it, or are you a bowl that shatters?" Ichigo's energy then merges into a clear white godly hue, and he lets out a scream of absolute terror and pain as the almighty eyes appear yet again. His body begins to morph and change as it appears that he cannot contain the immense power. But then he lifts up his wooden sword and a bright light emanates from within it, almost restoring Ichigo, who then completes the trial and finds himself in front of Senjumaru. Now, key points about this. I don't have as much to say about this as I did last week, but it's still very cool things for us to discuss here because no, I don't believe Ichigo just absorbed the Soul King's power. Now, Ichigo is like multi-dimensional over... No, I don't think that's what happened. I don't think that you are able to absorb the powers of the Soul King without absorbing the Soul King, because like that's the whole point. Even from Ichibei's perspective, the reason why Ichibei is doing this is to have someone to possibly replace the Soul King. My goal here wasn't to make you the Soul King. I was just trying to confirm if you could replace him. So it makes no sense for Ichigo to absorb the actual powers of the Soul King. That's not what happened. What's happening here is Ichibei is doing two things, I believe. And I think we've already talked about this, but I'll reiterate. Number one, he's trying to see if Ichigo is compatible. Number two, he's trying to see if Ichigo is strong enough of a vessel to contain the power. So there's twofold. On one end, are you compatible? Like, do you have the makeup to at least be in the running? Yes. Secondly, if you are compatible, are you a vessel strong enough to hold that much power? And in this case, the answer is yes, but those are the things that he's trying to do. Now, this then brings up sort of a bigger question in that, well, how is Ichibei testing to see if Ichigo is actually able to withstand that power? And what difference is that from Ichigo specifically just absorbing the Soul King? So let's talk about that part. I think the way this test is working so far is that Ichibei is not necessarily literally putting the Soul King's power into Ichigo. However, he's giving him sort of like a taste. It's a test run of what it could be like. And the way that it's happening is revelations and memories. Everlasting revelations and memories is what Ichibei calls it. And that the weight he feels, and this is what Ichibei says, the weight you feel is what you are trying to protect. Everything that you see are everlasting memories and revelations. In other words, because we're not actually trying to make Ichigo absorb the Soul King, which is the only way you're going to get that power is to absorb him. That's what Yuha did. Because we're not doing that, the way Ichibei is able to confirm that Ichigo A is compatible and B is a vessel strong enough is using this trial where Ichigo is now going to see these everlasting memories of both the past and the future. And these memories and revelations translate to the weight he's feeling. And so in theory, I guess not even in theory, it's literally happening. If Ichigo is able to see these things, to feel the weight and the pressure of the knowledge, the burden of knowledge that Ichigo finally has, the burden of wisdom, it's so biblical almost in that, from a biblical perspective, they talk about how, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, in that the burden and the ability in of itself is knowing good and evil, and that in of itself is what makes it so dangerous, or it's what makes it so powerful. So like in this case, the essence of this power literally has to do with the knowledge of what happened, and the knowledge of what the Soul King had to go through, and the knowledge and understanding of what he's doing. And that is translating to the literal weight of the entire world on Ichigo's shoulders, which he does succeed in withstanding and making to the end. And I think that is the purpose of the Irasu Sando trial in its fullest. You can't make it far if you're not compatible, and you can't make it to the end unless you're a vessel strong enough to withhold that power, both of which Ichigo can do. Now, as far as the Almighty thing is concerned, in the last review I did make it clear there were three options. It's either a reflection, B, it's either a byproduct of the trial, or C, it's foreshadowing for what is to come. And I made that very clear, all right? So I don't think it was option 1 because there was nobody there. Option 2 is still very likely. I said it was 50% likely that that is the case. It's just a byproduct of the trial. Option 3, we'll have to wait and see. We don't know if Kubo is going, because if you really think about it, why is Kubo putting these almighty eyes in Ichigo's eyes? It could be because of the trial. 100%, I'm with you. I feel like it's 50% chance that's the case. But the only way we'll know is if we see where Kubo's gonna go with this, because he could have done this trial without specifically putting the Almighty in Ichigo's eyes. Because chronologically speaking, Yuha hasn't shown the Almighty yet, which means we saw it, like we've seen it on Ichigo before we've seen it on Yuha, which is kind of funny. But whatever, I digress. We'll see where it goes. So anyway, overall, this episode, I thought it was great. This is another 9 out of 10. Bleach Thousand Blood War Core 2, the biggest benefit of this core overall is that there are no bad episodes. There are no mid episodes. It's always good to great, good to great. And every episode so far has built on the last. And more intense, talented animators are appearing little by little. Like you saw Hiroyama here a little bit. You saw Satoshi Sakai in the one before. You saw Ivako in the one before. You also see that Wakabayashi is maybe storyboard in the next one. And like the big hitters are slowly coming out of the woodwork, slowly building to a crescendo, which is really, really cool because people have been dogging on Bleach so far, not understanding that as opposed to the first core, the good stuff in the first core was at the beginning. So the beginning was really, really high quality and then sort of descended and tailed off. In core 2, the good stuff is at the middle to the end. You got to get a little bit further into it. And so we're now at that point. We'll see where it goes. So of course, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next Rebirth video. This is your boy, signing out. Peace.